A broad outline of Vedanta. Explanations of Sri Sachidananda Saraswati Swamiji, HoLenaraseepura, Karnataka. Compiled by Sri D.B.GangoLLi and published by AdhyAtma PrakAsha KAryAlaya, HoLenaraseepura. Today is the 33rd point in that. Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om. Shri Ganeshaya Namaha. Dr. Krishnamurti Shastri, Dambe Punacha, Karnataka. So, let us continue a broad outline of Vedanta. In that, we have already seen 32 points. Today is the 33rd. Although what is seen in the dream becomes falsified in the waking, in the dream those things exist in reality alone. In the same manner, from the standpoint of jnanis or liberated or realized souls, there is no bondage, no liberation, no aspirant, no discipline, no seekers of liberation. There is no creation, no sustenance, and no dissolution of the world. To signify or teach this, there is no need of the scriptural texts too. Then the scriptural texts are not scriptural texts. Even so, from the standpoint of the ignorant people, all these exist in reality. Therefore, whether they are religious acts or duties or scriptural texts or the knowledge about the self, from the empirical standpoint, they do not become futile. The empirical dealings of valid means of cognition and the objects of cognition also are real. Vyavaharika satta, empirical existence. This is the 33rd point. Next, the 34th. Both the valid means of cognition, pramana, and the scriptural text, shastra, must be treated as absolutely real and not that they are true only from the standpoint of the ignorant people, and to say like that is not proper. In ignorance, can they be real or valid means of cognition? This is the 11th doubt. To this, the solution is the valid means of cognition or pramana are the immediate instruments to the experience which is real. Because the senses, the mind, etc., are such immediate instruments of cognition, they are themselves called the valid means of cognition, pramana. The senses are attached to and accompany the body. One who does not know or identify the body as I and mine cannot be a cognizer, pramatra. A cognizer or pramatra means one who desires to use the valid means of cognition and to know the reality of the object of cognition. But because for Atman or the self of this essential nature of pure being consciousness, neither the body nor the senses really exist, he cannot be truly a cognizer or pramatra. Because of the fact that unless it is surmised or conceived that Atman or the self of the innate nature of pure consciousness has relationship with the body, the senses, etc., Atman cannot become pramatra or cognizer. And further, because of the fact that unless there is pramatra, a cognizer, transaction of using valid means of cognition, pramana, vyavahara, cannot take place without pramatra. The ignorance of conceiving or imagining the relationship of the body, senses, etc., is itself the basic foundation for all valid means of cognition. It being so, the statement that the valid means of cognition or pramanas are real in the state of ignorance is not a vain pronouncement. It is true. It is a true statement, that is, pramanas are for ignorance. So, next is the 35th point. If the valid means of cognition, like perception, inference, etc., as well as the scriptural texts, are given up or discarded, other means of knowing or cognizing reality do not exist at all. Then, how can the reality be known? Because even the scriptural texts, which are the valid means, are real as a result of ignorance. The knowledge called Brahma Vidya or knowledge of Brahman, the ultimate reality, will also become ignorance alone, is it not? Then how can that Brahma Vidya be believed to be true or proper? This is the 12th doubt. It has been previously itself mentioned that because Atman or the Self is self established, to know him there is no need of any kind of valid means of cognition whatsoever. If what is not Atman or the Self is conceived to be Atman, then the scriptural texts tell us in the manner that is not Atman. To that extent, the scriptural texts are the valid means of cognition. But because the scriptural texts teach us that the empirical transactions involving the valid means or pramana and the objects of cognition, prameya, are themselves ignorance alone. Once this knowledge or conviction arises, even the scriptural texts also become means which are rendered invalid. From this, there is no harm or damage done to their validity as the right means of teaching the ultimate reality of Brahman or Atman. Thus, because the scriptural text teaches that the empirical transaction of using the valid means of cognition to know the objects of cognition is itself born out of misconception, the nomenclature of Antya Pramana or the final valid means of cognition given to the scriptural text suits them. So that is Antya Pramana or final cognition to the scriptural texts. Final valid means of cognition are the Shastras. After learning that you are Brahman or Atman, so everything becomes Sarvam Khalvidam Brahma. Shastra also becomes Brahman only. Everything, if you think. Then it is not Shastra, it is Brahman. So all the means of cognition become invalid. It is not a means of cognition then for a Brahmajnani who has realized or who has cognized. It is also Brahman only. So after getting this knowledge, then what they say is it is invalid as a means of cognition. It doesn't mean that it is invalid for an ignorant, that is for a person who has not yet gained that knowledge of Brahma or Atma. For them it is useful as a valid, that's Antya Pramana, valid means of cognition, final valid means of cognition. So that is the 35th point. Instead of calling or stating all that is seen to be false in the manner liberation, bondage are unreal, the empirical transaction of valid means of cognition is real only from the standpoint of ajnana or ignorance. The scriptural texts too are valid means from the standpoint of ignorance alone is not the argument of saying perception, inference, etc. are real. The scriptural texts too are the valid means, bondage, liberation, etc. are real. If jivas or souls adopt the practices of or disciplines as stipulated in the scriptural texts and gets rid of bondage, they attain liberation, which is real itself better. That is the 13th doubt. If bondage is real, that can never be removed by knowledge. Whatever practice or discipline it may be, it can obtain a fruit which is attainable, prapya phala only, but it cannot destroy a real entity or thing, nor can it transform or change the essential nature of being, paramartha swarupa of a substance of an object, nor can it make or produce that which is obtained afresh or anew as eternal also. If this fact is kept in mind, the innate identification or misconception that bondage must be real will vanish into the thin air. That is the thing here, 36th. Next, 37th point. The argument or theory that bondage which is real is to be cut asunder and liberation is to be attained afresh cannot be sustained. For apart from Paramatman, the Supreme Self, a separate jiva or soul who is in the clutches of bondage does not exist at all. If it is contended that jiva is now really in bondage and thereafter attains the nature or state of liberation, it will amount to saying that liberation got afresh will be non-eternal. It should not also be understood that after a particular refinement or purification of Atman or the self, liberation is attained. For to bring about a good quality and to remove a blemish or fault goes by the name of samskara or refinement. But there is no quality whatsoever which does not exist in Atman and which exists apart from him. In Atman, of the essential nature of pure being consciousness, there does not at all exist any blemish or impurity whatsoever. Therefore, to say that by virtue of samskara, refinement or purification, liberation is attained is not proper. Even to think that Brahman exists in a particular place and we can attain it by going there is wrong only. For as Brahman is all pervading, there is no question of attaining it afresh. This is the 37th point. Next, 38th. Even if it is maintained or insisted upon that liberation or moksha is not attained through any practice or discipline, it has to be necessarily or invariably accepted that only after the attainment of jnana or self-knowledge this liberation is attained. Therefore, it amounts to saying that liberation is the effect of the cause of jnana or knowledge alone. If all effects are non-eternal, then liberation, which is the effect of jnana, also will have to be to become non-eternal. Is it not? This is the 15th doubt. Liberation or moksha is not caused by jnana or self-knowledge. Already ever existing liberation itself is known through jnana, self-knowledge. Proper or correct knowledge means the knowledge that signifies an existing entity alone and not the one having the power or capacity of creating what is not existent. Therefore, because liberation or moksha, being ever existing, is known or cognized through jnana or self knowledge, it should be understood that the statement to the effect liberation is the effect of self knowledge is made as a formality or for name's sake alone. So it is not attained, it is just realized, that's all, or cognized. Next, 39th point. If apart from Atman or the Self, there is no separate Brahman, then it amounts to saying that Brahman himself is a samsari or transmigratory soul. What about this predicament? This is the 16th doubt. Because if apart from Atman or the Self there is no separate Brahman, already we are seeing all these are samsaris. So Brahman also samsari. What do you tell about this? The fact that samsara or transmigratory state of repeated births and deaths does not exist to anyone. This alone is the real philosophical teaching, because it has been substantiated by following everyone's experience that Atman or the self of the essential nature of pure being consciousness is Brahman itself. That is the ultimate reality, and that in him there does not exist any samsara whatsoever. It will never be proper to say that Brahman is a samsari. Therefore, to say that samsara exists is itself ajnana or ignorance. Next is the 40th. In that case, because Atman has to have ajnana or ignorance, it amounts to saying that Brahman has ajnana, is it not? By knowing Brahman, who has ajnana or ignorance, what benefit or purpose on earth are we to attain? This is the 17th doubt. To this doubt, the solution is Atman or the self knows avidya or ignorance by making it an object to his jnana or pure consciousness. Therefore, it amounts to saying that ajnana or ignorance is different from Atman or the self indeed, and not that it. That is, ajnana is an inherent quality, dharma of Atman. Can it be said that in one who knows an earthen pot, the qualities of that earthen pot exist? One person who knows the earthen pot, can you say that he has the qualities of that earthen pot? He knows just the earthen pot. Means he need not have the qualities of that thing, that is earthen pot. It should not be said that like that. In the same manner, avidya, I, notion, intellect, mind, etc., all these are called anatman or not self. They are not atman at all. In pure consciousness of Chaitanya, which is of the essential nature of pure being Atman, there does not exist any avidya or ignorance whatsoever. Sushupti or deep sleep, samadhi or trance, etc., by means of these experiences, this essential nature of pure being can be cognized or intuited. This fact has been previously mentioned too. Next is in the 41. In that case, it amounts to saying no one has ajnana or ignorance and no one has a samsara too. Is it not? Then what purpose can be served by the scriptural text at all? This is 18th doubt. For that we can say, to just make him know that he is jnani, he is asamsari. To make him know, that's all. These scriptures are there. After it is known that no one has either ajnana or ignorance, samsara, the transmigrated state of repeated births and deaths, and that Atman or self is of the essential nature of nitya or eternal existence, shuddha, pure existence, buddha, omniscience, mukta, liberated state, there is no other purpose whatsoever remaining to be served by the scriptural texts at all. Only for those who do not know this truth, the scriptural texts are needed. That's why, to make them know. If anybody knows it, his real nature, they need not use texts or shastras. So once we are knowing, then why we are again we are reading it, we are studying it, we are listening to it. Why? Because to finally get into that. That is, sometimes we may be listening to something and we will leave it off from the other ear, and after day to day transactions, we will forget. Sometimes we will not be we will forget like that, just like that, for that momentarily. That's why to again and again remind the same thing, so that we will not forget it at every moment of life. Then we will be staying in that only, in our pure self-consciousness in every moment. That is the Brahma Jnana or Brahma Nishtha, Brahmatma Nishtha stage that we should attain. Simply once knowing, I know that, but I am doing this. Like what Duryodhana told in Mahabharata, Janami dharmam nachame pravurtihi. I know what is real, but I don't like to do that. That is like for a jnani, here nothing has to be done. There no duty as such, but still, whatever he does, it should not be harmful to others. Then only he becomes a pure jnani. That's why he should be having the presence of mind whatever he is having knowledge, he should have the presence of mind every moment of in his life. That's why we are repeatedly reading, studying, listening to this Vedanta teachings, so that we won't remember, forget it at any moment of life, so that we won't step out from the right way. So, next is the 42nd point. I think we can see tomorrow. Hare Rama. Shri Sachidananda Arpitamastu. Om Tat Sat.